My name is Jean Wingate, and I was 28 years old when everything finally cracked. Though looking back, it had been fracturing long before I admitted it to myself. I work in IT for a mid-sized company in a city big enough to feel alive, but small enough that your reputation still matters. My job isn't glamorous. No flashy titles, no dramatic LinkedIn posts, but it's stable, it pays well, and most importantly, it allowed me to build a life that felt grounded. I've always been that person, dependable, consistent, the one friends call when they need help moving or a ride at 2 in the morning. I show up. I always have. That's how I love too. When I met Larry, it was at a casual game night hosted by mutual friends. No grand sparks, no dramatic first impression. Just an easy conversation that stretched longer than either of us expected. He was charming in a relaxed way, funny without trying too hard, warm, attentive. The kind of man who made you feel seen when he looked at you. Within 6 months, we were exclusive. Within 2 years, he'd moved into my apartment. It felt natural, earned, like something steady was being built brick by brick. At least that's what I told myself. Larry worked freelance, bouncing between creative projects that paid well when they landed, and not at all when they didn't. I never resented that. I believed in him. When work slowed, I covered rent without hesitation. I handled most of the bills, cooked after long days, managed the invisible logistics that keep a life running smoothly. When he talked about taking an online course to sharpen his skills, I paid for it. When his flight got delayed during a family emergency, I drove 6 hours through a storm to pick him up so he wouldn't have to deal with a cab at 2 in the morning. I didn't keep score. That's what love is supposed to be, right? But there were things I brushed aside, little moments that didn't sit right, comments I convinced myself were harmless. Larry talked about his ex-girlfriend Rachel more than felt normal. They dated for years before me, and he always framed it as old history. Something resolved and irrelevant. Still, she came up in conversations where she didn't need to. Comparisons slipped in under the guise of jokes. Stories told with a softness that lingered a second too long. I ignored it. He'd grown more distant in the months leading up to his birthday. Less affection, more time on his phone. Short answers when I asked how his day was. I chalked it up to stress, to money worries, to creative frustration. I told myself relationships have seasons. You don't abandon ship during the quiet ones. So when his birthday approached, I threw myself into planning something special. The party was my idea. He mentioned wanting to celebrate, but hadn't organized anything, so I took over. I rented extra speakers, ordered catering from his favorite place, decorated the apartment with string lights and balloons. I invited friends, his, mine, ours, and surprised him with a custom cake the night before, designed around his work. "You're incredible," he said, hugging me tightly. For a moment, it felt like we were back on solid ground. I went to bed believing that. I didn't know I was already standing on the edge of something that was about to collapse. The party started at 8 on a Friday night, and for the first hour, I let myself believe I'd been wrong about everything. Music pulsed through the apartment, warm and familiar, the kind of playlist Larry always liked, upbeat enough to feel celebratory, mellow enough to talk over. People filled the space easily, drinks in hand, laughing, reconnecting. I floated between groups like a host on autopilot, refilling ice, introducing coworkers to old friends, making sure no one felt left out. This was my element too, making things run smoothly, creating comfort. Larry looked happy, really happy. He laughed louder than he had in months, his shoulders relaxed, his face open in a way I hadn't seen lately. Every now and then, he caught my eye across the room and smiled. Once he raised his glass to me. Another time, he brushed past and squeezed my hand. "See," I told myself, "this is good. We're fine." Then the doorbell rang. I was closest, so I opened it without thinking. And there she was. Rachel. She stood there like she belonged, tall and confident, camera bag, slung casually over her shoulder as if she'd just come from a shoot. Her smile was effortless, familiar. Too familiar. For a split second, I wondered if I was misreading the situation, if maybe I'd forgotten an invitation I didn't remember sending. "Hey," she said brightly. "Larry said I should stop by." My stomach dropped. I forced my face into something polite, stepped aside, and let her in. Behind me, the party continued oblivious. But something in the room shifted for me immediately, like the air had thickened. Larry spotted her almost instantly. His expression changed, surprise first, then something warmer, almost relieved. He crossed the room, quickly greeting her with a laugh that landed too easily, too naturally. They hugged, and it lasted just a beat longer than it needed to. I stayed in the kitchen, my hands busy with glasses I didn't need to wash, watching them from the corner of my eye. They fell into conversation effortlessly, heads tilted close, laughing at things I couldn't hear. Rachel touched his arm when she spoke. He didn't pull away. Friends noticed. I could tell. A couple of them glanced between us, then looked away, pretending not to see. No one said anything. No one wanted to be the one to acknowledge the tension humming under the music. Eventually, I told myself to stop hiding. I walked over, slid an arm around Larry's waist, leaned in with a smile that felt tight. "Hey," I said lightly. "Didn't realize you'd be stopping by tonight, Rachel." She looked at me, really looked at me like she was assessing something. Then she smiled. "Yeah, last-minute thing. Hope that's okay." Larry didn't answer. He just shifted slightly, not away, but not closer either. That was when I felt it. That subtle withdrawal, that invisible step back. Rachel said something under her breath to him. I couldn't hear it, but I saw his shoulders stiffen. His eyes flicked toward the hallway. "Jean," he said, "can we talk for a second?" He didn't wait for my answer. He led me into the hallway, but not far enough for privacy. Voices still carried. Laughter from the living room floated toward us, sharp and mocking in contrast. "Look," he said, lowering his voice. "Rachel feels kind of weird with you hovering like that." I blinked. Hovering. "You're making her uncomfortable," he continued, like this was reasonable. "It's my birthday. I just want everyone to relax." I stared at him, trying to process the words. "Larry, this is our apartment. I planned this party." He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "You're taking this too personally. We have history. We're just catching up." "History. I'm not doing anything wrong," I said quietly. "I'm just here." "And that's the problem," he snapped, the irritation slipping through. "You're acting insecure. It's killing the vibe." The dismissal hit harder than I expected. Maybe, he added, crossing his arms, you could hang out in the bedroom for a bit. Or step out. Just until she leaves. For a second, everything went silent in my head. "You want me to leave," I said slowly. "My own home." He rolled his eyes. "Don't be dramatic. It's not about you. The party's for me, not your feelings." There it was. The logic twisted so neatly it almost impressed me how my presence had become the issue, how his discomfort had turned into my fault. People nearby pretended not to listen, but the tension had already spread. I could feel eyes on us, judgment mixed with curiosity. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I didn't beg. I just nodded. "Okay," I said, "if that's what you want." I grabbed my jacket, walked past the living room without another word, and closed the door behind me. The music cut off abruptly as the door shut, like someone had muted my life mid-song. In the elevator, my hands shook. In the car, I sat there staring at the steering wheel, the weight of it all crashing down at once. Every late night, every sacrifice, every time I chose us over myself. And this was where it led. I drove to a quiet diner a few blocks away and sat in a booth nursing a mug of bitter coffee long after it went cold. My phone buzzed, friends checking in, asking if I was okay. I answered with a thumbs up and nothing else. Larry didn't text. Not once. That silence said everything I'd been avoiding for months. By the time I drove home near midnight, the party was long over. The apartment was dark, littered with empty cups, deflated balloons, and half-eaten cake. The celebration looked hollow now, abandoned like a lie no one bothered to clean up. I stood in the middle of the living room and felt something inside me go still. This wasn't confusion anymore. This was clarity. And it changed everything. I didn't cry that night. That surprised me most of all. I stood there in the middle of the living room, the string lights still glowing. Faintly balloons sagging against the walls like they were tired of pretending. Empty cups crowded the coffee table. Smears of frosting marked the custom cake I'd ordered with such care. The evidence of my effort was everywhere, and somehow none of it mattered. The unfairness pressed against my chest, but it didn't explode. It hardened. I walked into the bedroom and opened the closet. Larry's suitcases sat stacked neatly in the corner. The same ones we'd used on that coastal trip last summer, back when we still laughed easily when he reached for my hand without hesitation. I pulled them out and laid them open on the bed. I moved slowly, deliberately. No throwing things. No dramatic gestures. Just folding his clothes with the same precision I used when I packed for trips we never took anymore. T-shirts, jeans, jackets, shoes lined carefully at the bottom. His toiletries went into a small bag, his laptop charger, his camera accessories. Every item felt like proof of something I'd given that he hadn't protected. I boxed up the freelance equipment from the desk in the living room, the one I'd helped him set up when work dried up. Even the half-dead plant he'd insisted we keep because it made the place feel creative. By the time I was done, the apartment felt lighter. The note came last. I tore a small square from a pad of sticky notes and wrote a single sentence, neat and controlled. Now nobody's uncomfortable. No sarcasm, no explanation, just the truth handed back exactly as I'd received it. I called a 24-hour locksmith from my phone and explained it as a security issue. He arrived just after 1 in the morning, professional, silent, efficient. While he worked, I logged into the utilities and transferred everything back into my name. A few clicks, a few confirmations. It felt strangely empowering how simple it all was. By 2 a.m., Larry's belongings were stacked neatly in the hallway outside the door. I locked it. I slept on the couch that night. My phone on silent, my mind oddly clear. There was no mental replay of the argument, no urge to draft texts I wouldn't send. He'd made his choice in front of a room full of people. I'd simply accepted it. The next morning I woke early. The sun crept through the blinds, catching dust motes in the air. My chest felt hollow, but not broken. More like something had been removed that had been weighing me down for a long time. I blocked Larry's number, not out of spite, but because I needed space to breathe without his words reshaping my resolve. I called in sick to work, then did something I hadn't done in months. I went to the gym. I pushed myself hard, letting the burn in my muscles drown out the noise in my head. Sweat-focused repetition. When I left, my body ached, but my mind felt swingate. That afternoon, I met a friend for coffee, the same one who'd texted during the party. I told her the basics stripped of drama. He asked me to leave my own apartment for his ex, I said. She stared at me for a long second, then shook her head. That's unforgivable. I didn't argue. I didn't soften it. I just nodded. The days that followed blurred together. I threw myself into work and picked up a side project that demanded long hours and rewarded focus. I signed up for online therapy, nothing intense, just a space to talk honestly. By the second session, the therapist said something that clicked painfully into place. You weren't abandoned at that party, she said. You were abandoned emotionally long before it. I thought about the comparisons, the distance, the way I'd shrunk myself to keep things peaceful. I started journaling private, unfiltered reflections about what I'd given up. The promotion I passed on because it would have meant relocating, and Larry didn't want to move. The nights I stayed up helping him meet deadlines while he scrolled through his phone. A week passed. Larry still hadn't reached out. Not to apologize, not to ask if I was okay, not even to retrieve his things. That silence hurt more than any argument could have. When mutual friends began relaying messages, he can't get into the apartment. He's confused. He's upset. I changed the subject. I wasn't confused. I wasn't upset. I was done. I rearranged the apartment, bought new sheets, created an evening routine that included long walks and quiet music. People noticed the shift. You seem lighter, someone said at a casual hangout. I was. Whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain, I wasn't going backward. And somewhere, whether he realized it yet or not, Larry was about to learn exactly what he'd lost. The quiet that followed wasn't empty, it was productive. Without Larry in the apartment, my days began to fall into a rhythm that belonged entirely to me. Mornings were intentional now. I woke up earlier, cooked real breakfast instead of grabbing coffee on the way out, and left for work without the subtle tension that had once followed me out the door. At the office, I was swingate, focused. I finished tasks faster, spoke up more in meetings, and when a side project landed on my desk that normally would have felt overwhelming, I took it without hesitation. Work noticed. A manager pulled me aside one afternoon and told me I'd been stepping up lately. The word stuck with me. Stepping up, as if I'd finally reclaimed parts of myself that had been muted for the sake of someone else's comfort. Therapy helped too. Each session peeled back layers I hadn't realized were there. The therapist didn't villainize Larry, she didn't need to. She just asked questions. When did you start feeling like you had to earn your place? When did you stop expecting reciprocity? Those questions lingered long after our calls ended. Friends drifted closer, filling gaps I hadn't noticed were widening before. Dinners turned into long conversations instead of rushed check-ins. People stopped walking on eggshells around me like they sensed I was no longer fragile. And while I was rebuilding, Larry was unraveling. I didn't go looking for updates. I muted his social media. I avoided conversations that drifted too close to him. But when lives overlap, news finds you anyway. After the party, he hadn't come home. He'd gone with Rachel. What was supposed to be catching up reignited fast and recklessly. Mutual friends mentioned it carefully, as if worried the information might hurt me. It didn't. It felt distant, like hearing about a stranger making predictable mistakes. The illusion cracked quickly. Larry's freelance work remained inconsistent, and without me smoothing over the gaps, the instability became obvious. He borrowed money from friends, missed deadlines, started showing up late to things he used to care about. Rachel, it turned out, wasn't the carefree muse he remembered. She was volatile, jealous, suspicious, quick to accuse him of things that didn't exist. A male client texted him late one night. She exploded. He liked an old photo on social media. She accused him of being stuck in the past. Their fights were loud, messy, public. Friends started pulling away. "He's spiraling," someone told me quietly over drinks. "It's bad." I didn't respond. Eventually, the relationship collapsed under its own weight. Rachel cut things off abruptly after a blowout argument and blocked him everywhere. No closure, no explanations, just gone. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Without her, without me, Larry was suddenly exposed. No emotional buffer, no financial stability, no one organizing his life behind the scenes. He couch-surfed for a while, burned through goodwill quickly, and when his freelance gigs dried up entirely, panic set in. That was when he started circling back. The first message came late one evening while I was cooking dinner. A simple text from an unknown number. "Jean, we need to talk." No apology, no acknowledgement, just urgency. I didn't reply. The next day, another message. "This has gone far enough. Let me at least grab my things." Still nothing. Voicemails followed. His voice sounded tired, frustrated, laced with disbelief, like he couldn't comprehend that silence could be permanent. "I made a mistake," he said in one. "Rachel was a disaster. I see that now. We had something good. You can't just throw it away." The entitlement was still there, hiding behind regret. I deleted the voicemail and blocked the number. He tried again through mutual friends, then through family members who didn't know the full story. One afternoon, his sister called, her tone sharp and judgmental. "Jean, this is cruel," she said. "You kicked him out and changed the locks like he meant nothing. Relationships have ups and downs. You're punishing him." I listened without interrupting. "Larry humiliated me publicly," I replied calmly. "This isn't punishment, it's boundaries." She scoffed. "You're being dramatic." I hung up. The attempts escalated. One Saturday afternoon, my intercom buzzed while I was mid-workout. "It's me," his voice crackled through the speaker. "Let me up. We need to sort this out." I didn't buzz him in. According to the doorman, he waited outside for nearly an hour before leaving. He slipped a note under my door before he went. "You're heartless. I thought you were better than this." I threw it away without rereading it. Every attempt only reinforced what I already knew: he didn't miss me. He missed the life I'd held together for him. And I was already moving forward. By the time Larry's messages slowed, my life had already shifted into something steadier, something that no longer revolved around anticipating his next move. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. What I felt was distance. Emotional, mental, irreversible distance. That's why the updates, when they reached me, landed without impact. Apparently, after Rachel cut him off, Larry unraveled fast. The creative spark he'd always talked about, the one he said I'd never fully understood, couldn't sustain him when things got hard. Without someone smoothing the edges of his life, the chaos caught up all at once. He bounced between friends' couches, overstaying his welcome. Borrowed money he couldn't repay. Missed deadlines that used to slide when I was quietly stepping in behind the scenes. Clients stopped responding. Opportunities dried up. The same friends who once defended him began distancing themselves, tired of the excuses and the mood swings. I heard he'd lost a major contract after showing up late, an unprepared something I used to help him prevent. I heard he'd blown up at someone over a minor criticism. I heard his confidence had turned brittle, defensive, desperate. It was strange realizing how much of his independence had been supported by my stability. Meanwhile, my life kept expanding. I took evening walks without headphones, letting my thoughts wander freely. I accepted a promotion that came with more responsibility and more visibility. I said yes to plans without worrying who I might upset. My apartment became a sanctuary instead of a shared, compromised, cleaner, quieter mine. And then unexpectedly, I met Lucas. It wasn't dramatic. No lightning strike, no instant obsession. He was someone I crossed paths with through work, calm, observant, quietly confident. We started with coffee, then walks, then conversations that didn't feel like negotiations. He listened without waiting to speak. He didn't need to be managed. He showed up when he said he would. I didn't rush anything. I wasn't trying to replace Larry. I was discovering what it felt like not to shrink. News of my progress eventually reached Larry. That's when the tone of his messages, the ones filtered through other people, changed. What started as entitlement shifted into panic. He wasn't just asking for conversation anymore. He was asking for rescue. "She's doing great," someone told him casually. "She's moved on." That was when he started pushing harder. Emails from new addresses, apologies wrapped in self-pity, long explanations about how Rachel had manipulated him, how stress had clouded his judgment, how he'd learned so much since losing me. He framed his downfall like a tragedy he'd survived, not something he'd caused. I didn't respond to any of it. The final attempt came 6 months after the party at a mutual friend's birthday gathering downtown. I hesitated before going, but I refused to keep rearranging my life around a man who no longer had access to it. Lucas came with me. The bar was warm and crowded voices blending into a comfortable hum. I was mid-conversation when I felt that familiar prickle of being watched. Larry stood near the bar, thinner than I remembered. Eyes tired, drink untouched. When he spotted me, his face lit up with something that looked like relief. He approached slowly, cautiously, like someone afraid of being rejected before he even spoke. "Jean," he said, "I didn't know you'd be here." "I was invited," I replied evenly. His gaze flicked to Lucas standing comfortably beside me. Something in Larry's expression faltered. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Privately." I didn't move. "What do you need to say?" His voice dropped. "I messed up. Rachel was a mistake. Everything fell apart after you left. I see it now. I lost the best thing in my life." There it was not remorse, but realization. "I'm alone," he added quietly. "I'm barely getting by. Seeing you like this, it made me realize what we had." I felt nothing. "Larry," I said calmly, "you told me I was making someone else uncomfortable in my own home. I respected that and left." He swallowed. "I didn't mean it like that." "But you said it," I replied, "and now you're making me uncomfortable." The words landed hard. He opened his mouth, then closed it. His face flushed humiliation, mixing with anger. "You'll regret this," he muttered, turning away abruptly. Lucas squeezed my hand gently, not possessive, supportive. Later friends pulled me aside. "You handled that well," someone said. "Really well." I nodded, feeling the final weight lift. Because karma didn't need my involvement. It arrived on its own schedule, quietly, completely, and without mercy. And I was already somewhere else when it did. The strange thing about closure is that it doesn't arrive with fireworks. It settles in quietly like dust after a storm, and one day you realize you're breathing easier without having consciously decided to move on. After Larry walked out of that bar, I never heard from him again. No surprise emails, no borrowed phones, no friends awkwardly checking in on his behalf. It was as if that final exchange, the moment I handed his words back to him without emotion, sealed something shut. Not just between us, but inside him too. He'd finally understood that there was no version of this story where I came back. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Life continued steadily and beautifully. My promotion at work became permanent, along with responsibilities that would have terrified me a year earlier. I thrived under them. Colleagues sought my input. Leadership noticed my consistency. I stopped downplaying my achievements to make anyone else feel more comfortable. At home, the apartment no longer felt haunted by compromise. Every piece of furniture, every routine, every quiet evening reflected choice instead of obligation. I hosted friends again, not to prove anything, not to distract myself, but because I wanted to. Laughter returned naturally without effort. And Lucas stayed. He never rushed me, never asked me to define us before I was ready. He learned my boundaries without challenging them, respected my silence when I needed it, and celebrated my independence instead of feeling threatened by it. Being with him felt easy in a way I hadn't known was possible. One night, months later, we talked about Larry briefly, honestly. "You don't sound angry," Lucas observed. "I'm not," I said after thinking for a moment. "I'm just done." And I meant it. A year passed faster than I expected. One evening, as we walked through the city after dinner, Lucas stopped under a string of lights outside a quiet restaurant. No crowd, no spectacle, just sincerity. He took my hands and said my name like it mattered. When he asked me to marry him, there was no fear in my chest, no doubt, just calm certainty. I said yes. I didn't think about Larry then. I didn't wonder where he was or what he felt. His chapter in my life had already ended neatly, and finally, the moment I chose myself over being tolerated. The last update I ever heard about him came through someone else long after it stopped mattering. Still struggling, still blaming circumstances, still talking about what could have been. But that wasn't my story anymore. Mine was about learning that love doesn't ask you to disappear, that loyalty shouldn't require humiliation, that walking away in silence can be louder than any argument, If you're standing where I once stood, being told you're too much, too inconvenient, too uncomfortable, believe this. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't to fight.